Claim: the U.S. government should actively work on getting rid of U.S. debt till it is below the GDP. Term: U.S. debt. The national debt, which is $31.46 trillion, is the total amount of outstanding borrowing by the U.S. federal government accumulated over the nation's history. This is from the U.S. Treasury website. Term: GDP. This is short for Gross Domestic Product, which is the total value of the goods produced and services provided in a country in 1 year. This is by the Oxford Language Dictionary. A high GDP means wages, profits, and the economy is growing. Term: actively. In a way that involves deliberate and vigorous engagement or effort. From dictionary.com. Term: budget. A spending plan based on income and expenses. From NerdWallet. Term: deficit. An excess of expenditures or liabilities over income or assets in a given period. From Oxford Language Dictionary. Term: economy. The wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of production or consumption of a good or services. From Oxford English Dictionary. The debt system started way back with Alexander Hamilton. In early America, had $8 million in debt, but realized that debt could not be paid off all at once. The system Alexander Hamilton started is still in place today. Each year, Congress divides its budget to pay for Social Security, Medicare, tax refunds, and military benefits. When Congress goes over its budget, which it usually does, a deficit is created. The U.S. Treasury pays off that deficit by borrowing money in the form of bonds sales, which creates debt. The debt builds up, but the Treasury can only borrow until it reaches the debt ceiling, which is the maximum amount of money that the Treasury can borrow. And then the ceiling needs to be raised. While having debt is important to create a thriving economy, economists are worried that the U.S. might fall into a recession because of the high amount of debt compared to the United States' gross domestic product. Contention number 1. The United States is continuously gaining more and more debt from interest alone. The amount of interest that is paid on the U.S. debt varies as interest rates are not set in stone. Currently, it takes $210 billion just on interest alone, and that is around 15% of the U.S. budget. While interest rates in the past have remained relatively stable, due to an increase in inflation, interest rates are increasing at a much faster rate. Currently, inflation prices are rising at a very fast rate, and because of that, the U.S. Treasury has raised interest rates by 0.25% multiple times. CNN believes that the federal interest payments could soon exceed military spending. Furthermore, with a recession on its way, it is hard to believe that it could get worse, but CNN has reason to believe that a recession would exacerbate the fiscal problems by expressing the amount of tax revenue the government takes in from business and individuals while simultaneously increasing government spending on unemployment, food stamps, and other social safety networks. End quote. Contention number 2. The United States economy growth is slowing down because the debt is larger than what the economy is worth. There are multiple ways that excessive debt can hurt the U.S. economy, both indirectly and directly. One way that the U.S. debt can hurt the economy indirectly is by setting off financial debt costs when people get worried about the rising debt consumers. But rising debt, consumers stop spending, delay large purchases, and operations hoard materials. Prices rise and business owners become more cautious about starting large projects. When these actions are taken by people, these affect the government revenue. That government will cut down on spending and growth will slow down. Peta summarizes this by stating, once a country reaches its debt capacity limits and credit creation slows, so does the country's GDP and economic activity." End quote. Due to rising interest rates, the government will end up spending more money paying back interest each year than supporting public endeavors, and there will be no investment in public interest that encourages economic growth. Higher interest rates and largest amount of debt lead to an increase in unemployment and a decrease in workers' wages. When businesses cut back on projects, there's less need for a larger number of workers to be part of the company, and the workers that stay on the company will be doing less work and therefore be being paid less. High amounts of debt can lead to a decrease in investors, which the U.S. government has already started to see, which is a massive problem. And this leads to even higher interest rates to get investors interested in buying more bonds. All of these problems can lead to recession, which you need more debt to get out of. Contention number 3. The U.S. state's debt is becoming a conflict in Congress and is being used as leverage for political parties to capitalize on their agenda. Right now, Congress is at a standstill, where the House of Representatives refuses to raise the debt ceiling until the Democratic Party promises to cut funding for Social Security and Medicare. The Treasury can move more money around, which is the only reason the U.S. economy has not defaulted on its debt yet. If the U.S. defaults on its debt, the effect would be seen worldwide, as the U.S. economy is one of the most stable, and it could lead to higher payments on interest in the future for the U.S. While the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt in the past, there have been multiple standoffs in Congress that have led to stress, a sharp decline in the stock market, and a downgrade in U.S. credit services. Summarized from NPR. This could happen again, as we see it happening now, and it can't. Rebuttal. Some people say that getting rid of debt is nonsensical because in the 1800s, former President Jackson got rid of all of the debt, but it unfortunately backfired and caused a recession that forced the government to take out debt to get out of the recession. Historian Ann Daly, who is a fellow at the American Antiquarian Society and works at the Mississippi State University, states that since there wasn't any income tax, taxing imports or tariffs was how the government made all its money. And Jackson increased the tariff to 38 to 48% on imported goods. Unfortunately, people had extra money, and now that debt was gotten rid of, they couldn't invest in that. And so there was no place to invest, they invested in very risky situations, such as land or railroads. All of these investments eventually fell through, and people were left in massive amounts of debt. They didn't have jobs, a lot of people became unemployed, and there was a lack of food. However, a recession could happen anyway because of the amount of debt that the U.S. is in.